who is a therapist and a healer. A while back, while I was in my Saturn return, I was looking for a therapist, and I wanted somebody who was also a healer, so that crossover of sharing intuitive information could be like really well received by somebody that also works in that realm. And somehow I think I was going to the den meditation for yoga for meditation classes, and saw you on there, Carolyn. And anyway, from there, started working with you, and really excited and honored to be able to bring you on the podcast. Full circle moment. We have Carolyn Coleridge with us today.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. So if you want to just, I know I gave a little bit of a spiel already on how I met you. Well, actually, even more divine alignment was that I think last year we ended up being at a happy hour for healers. And I was there with my co-host Ellen and got to introduce you. And then that was where I told you about the podcast and was like, oh, we should have you on to talk about all of your work. So Spirit's been definitely aligning. But yeah, so if you want to just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us about the work that you do today, yeah, that would be lovely.
Okay, great. Again, thanks for having me. I love your guys' work. It's beautiful out there. It's really to see young women of color doing great spiritual work. So I've been a therapist for 25 years, and I'm also an intuitive. People call it a psychic, and then also a healer. And psychic means of the soul, and psyche means of the mind. So right now we're in the Aquarian age. We're combining both. So it was good that I got into this work when I was studying at Columbia 25 years ago. I was studying to be a counselor, and then all of a sudden I would just start seeing ghosts, and I would see ghosts everywhere. That's a little weird. They would just show up. It was in Manhattan, so there's a lot of ghosts there. But they would just show up, and they would be at my bed, or I would wake up and I saw the muses, and they would be, knocking on my door, and I was like, "What is going on here?" And I called my mom, who's a chemistry teacher, and I said, "Mom, my God, I'm seeing ghosts." My mother had seen ghosts her whole life, so she didn't think it was anything weird. She's like, "Oh, that's interesting. How's your grades?" And I'm like, "How are my grades?" I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to do with them." She's like, "Oh, Carolyn." And then she goes to my grandmother. She goes, "Mom, Carolyn's like us." And she's like, "Oh, that's nice. How are her grades?" So they really normalized the experience. And I started searching on the spiritual realm because I wanted to, kind of get rid of them. So I wasn't so terrified because they would look like physical beings. I would just wake up in the middle of the night and see them sitting there talking to me. And I realized I was kind of doing afterlife therapy, like before I was even a therapist. So I just started going into the healing work, and then being in New York City, which is very draining for me. I grew up in Connecticut, and then I went to New York to go to Columbia. And it was just a lot of heavy energy. It's just very fast. It's very fast paced. I grew up in the suburbs, and I didn't know how to deal with all this energy. So went to an energy healer, and the energy healer was talking about ghosts and energy. So I became a Reiki master, but I never used it. And then I just started getting information. I started to see lights around people. I started to see auras around people. It just kind of, I was 28. I was right before my Saturn return. And I just did not know why it was happening right now. And just, I never had those experiences before, maybe a ghost or two, but nothing all the time. It was like somebody turned up the heat. So when I went to one's intuitive, she said, "Oh, you're in your Saturn return. This is normal. You're opening up to your true path." And I was like, "Well, what's my true path?" She said, "To be a psychic and a psychotherapist." And I said, "That's not going to happen. If I hear and see things and I'm at Columbia, a straight trip to the loony bin." So I like hearing and seeing things make you psychotic. And she's like, "Well, you'll be able to combine both." And I had no idea how I was going to do it. So I was reading Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life, talking about the universal knowledge. So I kept listening to, asking the universe different questions. Why did this happen? What's going on? And I would get these various answers, So, like one time I would go out in Manhattan, and 5 people came up to me and asked me, "Well, what are you doing? Where do I go to find, the World Trade Center or Chinatown or Upper Manhattan?" And I would tell them and give them directions. And then the next weekend it was like 10 people. The next weekend it was like 15 people. And me and my friend were walking around. They're like, "You're like a magnet for people that are lost." And I said, "Yeah." And then I said, well, universe, what am I supposed to be doing with being a psychic or a psychotherapist? And then it was like an aha moment. I said, I'm helping people find direction in life, like people who are lost. So after that happened, nobody ever came up to me as much, maybe one, maybe two. But it was like once the messages was given and then I got it, it went away. So then I started doing universal dialogue, incorporating the healing, incorporating readings, and the work just kept taking off in different areas. First New York, and then I moved to California. So
I was just going to add that when you said you went to the intuitive, who told you you were going to be combining both of the work of therapy and intuition? Like, especially at that time, I could imagine that to try to like look up to somebody to see how that was being done. Right. It wasn't as like maybe accessible or seen as it kind of is now.
yes.
So imagine at that time you're like, well, how am I supposed to do it? It's like it's a big task to be asked to do that.
Well, there was a Doreen Virtue who's actually shift gears. I don't know if you know her.
Wow.
She was, yeah, she's interesting now. She's born again Christian, but she was, that's another story. She was a psychotherapist who had a lot of, gifts, intuitive and clairvoyant. So I followed her for a long time. And then I met Judith Orloff in Manhattan, who wrote Second Sight and several other books. She's a psychiatrist that has intuitive gifts. And it's funny, when she signed my book, she said, Carolyn, a budding spiritual teacher. And I said, that's weird. Like, what is she talking about? Like, I'm not a spiritual teacher. So, and then years later, I ended up with her on CNN when I was on CNN. So I thought that was very interesting.
That was a full circle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
So our next question is like asking you what path that led you to this work, and what were any monumental moments that significantly impacted you. You kind of answered that already with kind of the people that you've met along this path that have kind of helped gear you that way, and the messages that you've received. But was there anything else that happened for you? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, all the time, a lot of different things. I think one significant thing was, besides seeing lights around my clients, and I wrote a lot about it in my book, Honor Your Spirit, the experiences, how the clients would teach me. But one time when I was in Manhattan, I was working on Wall Street as a counselor, and I had a private practice. And one of my clients was a woman who had a lot of trauma in her life. And I did not use my psychic ability. I did not use my healing. I was still training. I trained at the Edgar Cayce Institute. I trained at spiritualist churches on the side on the weekends, just to kind of stop the ghosts from bothering me, to know what was going on. Like, what is this other realm? What's this other world? So this one client I had, she was very depressed, suicidal. She was an alcoholic. She had prior history of being incarcerated for actually defending her self against a domestic violence case. So she got incarcerated. It was horrible. She's a gay black woman, and she had a lot of trauma. And you had a plan to hurt herself. And I was really nervous because her plan was so elaborate. And it was like August, and I was like, that means a lot of the psychiatrists in New York go to Connecticut and Long Island and the Hamptons. So there's nobody to help to call. So I said, oh my God, what do I do? And she goes, this is what I'm going to do, blah, blah, blah. So I trained in Reiki, but I never used it. But right then I decided to send her a Reiki symbol, the Choka Ray. And I sent it to her remotely, like without waving my hands, just telepathically. Just imagine the symbol coming from my third eye over to her. And all of a sudden she stopped and she came very calm. And she said, what did you do? I didn't move my hands. I know. It was kind of weird. I said, I just sent you a Reiki symbol. She said it felt like a wave of peace.
Right.
And then she got calmer and she said, oh, wow. She goes, maybe I have an importance here in life. And she just changed her whole thing. I was like, whoa, I got to incorporate this in my work. Yeah, it was so awesome. And I was like, oh my God. The first thing in my mind was like, it worked, I didn't because you have to make the symbol. And I didn't make it. I just sent it to her. And then I started to incorporate it. And it was funny too, because at the time I was working on Wall Street in an EAP, Employee Assistance Program. And I was trying to, we did mind body, we did stress, but I had no idea that the managing partner of the firm was a psychic. We're on Wall Street, and she was a psychic, and she eventually I was telling her about different things, and she said, "Forget about all this theories and stuff. Use your intuition. I can feel your energy. It's very high." And I was like, "Feel energy? I'm training as Reiki healer." She was, "Oh, you're opening up." So there was like two incidents where I was in this company, wearing a suit on Wall Street, with these high-end firms, and my boss was telling me to use my intuition over theory. And then my supervisor there was an astrologer. My other friend was going to see mediums. It was just weird, and I was just like, "Oh." So then I realized that how whatever you align with, the universe aligns you. So
Well, that's a very impactful, significant moment
Yeah.
to feel the responsibility of like this other human.
Yeah.
And you're like, what do I do? And like spirit came in and helped
To
you and
send
guide you.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%, yes. And I was very green. I wasn't, and I just didn't know. And I was really nervous that she would do something because she had prior suicide attempts, and she got a lot better after that. So to see the power of spirit, it's like I don't care what the people are telling me. I need to incorporate that, and then to have my manager back it up without knowing. And I was like, wow, this is important. Mind, body, spirit. That we are souls here having a spiritual, physical experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Love it.
And what is your personal history with spirituality? I know you mentioned a little bit about when you told your mom that you saw ghosts and she asked you what your grades were.
She's like, right.
um, yeah, like how did you grow up? How did you really step into your gifts?
hmm So I grew up in Connecticut, and it's funny because my mother is a science teacher, and she also had, a lot of paranormal experiences. She talked about seeing her relatives. She talked about a man that came to her when she was younger, an Indian man, and just on the street, and just started talking to her about, you're going to be very successful when you get older. She grew up very poor. My mother's from South America. She's from Guyana, which is considered the West Indies in some ways. And he told her, "You go very far. You do very well." And she said, "Wow, wow." She was like, took out a piece of paper, wrote it down, and then she turned around and said, "What else is going to happen?" And he disappeared. He was gone. So I heard stories like this my whole life. And then my father was a minister. He was in an Episcopal church, and then he became the first black bishop of Connecticut. And Connecticut is very conservative, very old money. And here's this man from South America too, becoming the bishop. And what's interesting, my father's also a social worker. My mother had a dream, so she'd have premonitions, and she said there's about 180 churches, or maybe 160 in Connecticut at the time, and three of them were black, most of them were white, and he had a black small congregation, a poor area. And my mother said, "I had a dream you're going to be the first bishop here." And he's like, "Are you crazy? This is never going to happen. What are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah." So she said, "No, my dreams are accurate." So it piqued my father's interest because her dreams have always been accurate. So she said, it's going to happen. So like a couple days later, knock, 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 somebody knocks on the door and says, "We've been looking at your work and all you've done." And my father created a daycare center, Habitat Humanity, built houses in his homes. He did a lot to get fundraisers from the wealthy people in Connecticut to help the people that were at high risk in the poor part of Bridgeport. And he, so he did grow, he did run. And then he won, just exactly as she said. She goes, "You won't run on the first ballot, you'll win on the third ballot." And if you know anything about the Episcopal Church, it's like a WASPy, White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So it was the first church of the Church of England. And Connecticut's the oldest and richest province. So these are people with monies for generations, They have names on buildings at Yale and Harvard. And here's this little black guy. So I saw the miracle of trusting spirit as my mother's premonition came true. And I saw how much people that were different from them appreciated the energy of spirit. My father, would give sermons, and they felt so moved because he didn't have a spoon in his mouth. He came over, very poor, and he trusted. He asked God. My mother would talk about coming over, and she didn't have any money, and she prayed and prayed, and this man saw her in Brooklyn and said, "Oh, you're so and so's daughter. I owe your father like $30." So she got $30. I fed her for a week. So I would just hear all these stories of manifestations of trusting spirit. And when it happened to me, I feel God knew what he was doing, or she knew what she was doing, because if I hadn't had a mother who had all these intuitive psychic experiences, I would have lost my mind, you know? So when she told me, she said, "Oh, that's normal. What, oh, you're just opening up now." I realized that it was normalized. So I grew up with parents that were praying, or they would ask, but they're very traditionally raised. But then my mother had this spiritual, psychic experiences. So when I went to Unity or I went to Science of Mind, they were like, "Oh, okay, try something different." It was never negated. And I like how I incorporate the science, which is the metaphysical. Um, and then the spiritual, and then the counseling. And so I combine both things from both parents. So I grew up in that kind of world, and then I really expanded upon it because my father, like nobody does that professionally. Like you don't go out and do that, and because in their country you don't do that. You just kind of, you have the gift. People will come. Like last night, my father was telling me that um, my grandmother on his side used to do readings in the community, and he didn't call them readings. He just called it discernment, a reading of spirit or counsel. She interpreted everyone's dreams. And I said, "Well, how many people should you see a week?" And he said, "I don't know, like maybe 5 or 6 or 7." And I said, "That was like a private practice." He goes, "Well, we didn't call it that. We just called, like being of spirit." So that's pretty much my background.
That's cool.
You said it took him 3 times?
Uh, to get elected?
Yeah.
Oh, no. He it was just 3 ballots. So like it's in like one time. It was the first time they elected him. But it's like 3 ballots. The first ballot, like it's a tie. The second ballot's a tie. The third ballot he won. So it's in the same time. But
I didn't know.
what's also interesting, if you know Meghan Markle, when she got married, that man who married her is the Episcopal Bishop Curry. So he's a presiding bishop. That's the same church my father's part of. And they wanted my dad to be that, the presiding bishop, but he was too old. He was already 65. So my mother went to Curry. You know who Curry is, right? The guy who did her wedding, the black man.
I don't know.
Okay. Well, it's just, Meghan Markle and the prince, right? They got married. No? Okay. So she married Prince, it's not William, the other one. So he was when they had the big wedding. Um, so my mother told him that you're going to be the presiding bishop of a church in the United States, and then he said, "No, I don't want to run." She goes, "No, you're going to win." He goes, "No, I don't want to." And then he ran and he won. So my mother said that for him too. So
Mm.
yeah, I'm just yeah. Mhm. So your intuitions, your gifts can really help. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the fact that you were able to have that growing up, that assurance and spirit of seeing. That's why that three stuck out to me. Of like your mom knowing that it was going to take him 3 rounds, and for you to get to witness that,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it really instills that faith system.
And 3 is the
Yeah.
number of portal opening. In like
Ah.
traditional like African spirituality, like they knock like 3 times to open portals and close portals. So like 3 is a
Oh.
very significant number of like clearing the path.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And three is like the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. And when I've done more research in metaphysics, the Holy Ghost is really the Divine Mother. That
Yep.
they changed it to the Holy Ghost to kind of the long story. Yeah.
So you've mentioned a little bit about your books, but I'd love for you to elaborate on. I know you have How to Work with the Universe, Soul Wisdom, and Honor Your Spirit, and How to Work with the Universe to incorporate into your meditation class at the den occasionally. So um, that one I know I have a little bit on top of mine, but if you want to like share um, what is really important for somebody to know about these books that might be interested in taking a look at them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for bringing them up again. How to Work with the Universe is actually a workbook that goes along with my book, Honor Your Spirit. So, Honor Your Spirit is my first book, and it talks about my path to listen to my spirit of having spiritual psychic experiences and then to incorporate them as a mental health counselor. Um, and it talks about my journey through Colombia or then asking for messages, and I use the three. It's like the law of three. So if I saw a sign 3 times, I would know that that was something that I needed to follow through, that the universe was corresponding with me, that there really was this dialogue. And like, for example, in the book, I give an example where when I saw those ghosts in my room, I went out to Manhattan and say, "This is crazy. Why are you seeing these ghosts?" So I was asking about, universe, show me a sign. And I was walking in Manhattan, um, and before I had seen a man in my room. He was an Asian man. I didn't know who he was. Later, I found out he was not well known, but he's an ascended master, Lanto, and he's a high priest and ascended from, China lifetimes ago. So I was walking in the street, and this man gave me a Buddha. And just out of the blue in Manhattan, I was just like, the universe showed me a sign. He goes, "Here, you need this Buddha," and an alabaster Buddha. And I'm like, oh my God, nobody in Manhattan gives you anything. So I was like, that's a sign. He's Asian, blah, blah, blah. So I kept walking down the street. And then I was walking in a Korean Buddhist parade. And they all laughed because I was so busy looking at the alabaster Buddha that I didn't know I was in a parade. So that was two. And then my friend called me and said, "Oh, we're starting a goddess circle, and it's the Amaterasu, the goddess from Japan of light." And I was like, well, there was three messages. There was a gift from the universe. There was walking on my path as I got into the parade. And then the third was an invitation to partake in spiritual work. And then that's when I became a Reiki master, which is a Japanese healing art. So I talk a lot about that in my book, and how like these magical things happened, and how when I was so scared, because it sounds like I just like went and ran and did it. No, I was like terrified that I would get kicked out of Columbia. I was losing my mind, or that people would think that I was really unprofessional by doing this psychic work. So, honor your spirit was eventually like I had to honor that spirit inside of me that was so drawn to metaphysics, so drawn to incense and talking about other dimensions, other planets, other star systems, people healing, shamanism, all the different types of spirituality that's out there, science of mind, and crystals and different things. So I had to honor that part of myself. So that's what that book is about. And then because I wanted people to start working with the universe, I created the workbook, How to Work with the Universe, where I would take questions at the end of each chapter and say, have you seen signs that have helped you? Have you heard messages that have come to you? Have you paid attention to your dreams and had a premonition? So then people can dialogue with that and start writing, and that they start opening up that spiritual part of them that's so powerful. And that's their guiding force. That's the most important thing. Your spirit is your guiding force in your life if you want to evolve as a soul. Our mind is there for the earth plane, but our spirit's there for our soul, and our soul is eternal. So I wanted people not to just think of the spirit on the side like a shadow, but honor it like we honor celebrities, we honor stars, we honor yourself, honor your spirit. So how to work with the universe is a workbook that people can work with, doing automatic writing, or working with chakras, working about dreams, and that would help them to become more aware of the spiritual essence. If you learn about your chakras, you realize that also is teaching you when you have certain issues and ailments in certain parts of your body. That's more information, because we're in the universe, which is a university. We're in school here on Earth to grow and learn. That's why they call it the universe. We're here and the universe is a song. It's an energy. So you think of verse, we all have a song, we have a rhythm, we have a sound, we have um, a path to take that resonates with our energy, and our energy that connects to us as souls. So whenever we feel connected to certain music, that's the universe speaking to us. And so a lot of the messages can come through totem animals, through sounds, through songs, through dreams, through synchronicity and signs that usually start in threes. So, and then my third book, Soul Wisdom, was just a compilation of all my newsletters I've written over the years, which were inspired by spirit. I talk about empaths and intuition and dreams and meditation. So it's one of those books you can just open at any page and just get inspired to read about something for the day. And again, contemplate that part of us that's right within us, our spirit, that energy force, that sacred guiding force that brought us here, and that at the very end will take us out. Those are my
Mm.
books. Yeah.
I remember, yeah, it must have been like a year and a half ago, going to your class. Was it called How to Work with the Universe? The class
Yes.
that you took then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The book, I remember you talking about universe, university. Actually, funny little side point. There was another girl in that class, and I remember her asking a lot of questions. I think you did a little bit of theta healing with us, like we all stood and did some kind of movement. But one of the girls in that class, I ended up connecting with on Instagram like a year later, and she's a musician and she's come on the podcast.
Yeah, we've had her on.
And we interviewed her, Trish. And anyway, I met her though in your class, and I knew I recognized her and couldn't figure out where it was from. And then as soon as she came over for the interview, I was like, "Wait, you were in Carolyn Coleridge class too?" And she was like going through her Saturn return. I remember her coming up and talking to you afterwards, and yeah,
Oh,
it was such a little like divine alignment, little gem.
absolutely. That's how it happens. That's awesome. Great to hear.
Yeah, it happened in your class, how to work with the universe. So
there you go.
But yeah, theta healing. I'm really curious for you to kind of talk a little bit more about that. I know you incorporate it with like your therapy sessions. We did theta healing, but like what led you to that modality specifically, and what are some of the benefits of it that you've seen from it with your sessions?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Theta healing is awesome. And theta healing is a certain vibratory rate. It's created by a woman named Viana Steibel, thetahealing.com. She's really amazing. She's where is she from? Idaho. And she basically was an intuitive and a naturopath. And she was trying to hide the intuitive part herself. And she had cancer in her knee. She has 3 kids. I think she was a single mom. She didn't know what she was going to do. And her cousin was sick too. So it got to the point where her knee was going to get she was going to get amputated. And she was like, "Oh no, this can't happen." So she was talking to her cousin. She goes, "I just want this to shift." I'm paraphrasing here. So her cousin was sick, and she said, "Well, I command, your body to get better." And her cousin got better, and she's like, "What did you do?" She goes, "I don't know." She goes, "You need to do that to yourself." So she commanded God to heal her leg, and it got better. And she never had the amputation, and the cancer was gone. It's kind of a miracle story. So theta healing is worldwide, and basically, when we're talking right now, we're in the beta state, and that's again energy vibration, because we are energy beings. When we go to sleep, we're in delta, and then when we meditate, we go to alpha. These are frequencies, and when a step above alpha is theta. So she incorporated a type of work where we get trained, you go up to the higher realms. So you go to the theta state, and it's kind of a meditation and a prayer, and you're able to heal people on this past life, soul level, ancestral, and genetic level. So that's genetic would be your ancestors, your cells, your historical would be past lives, your whole soul totality, and then your personality level. So she did that, and I was lucky, very, very lucky, that I actually got to train with her. She came to LA several times a year. And what it does is that you test muscles, or through kinesiology, we test beliefs, and it really helps the soul to evolve. So, and this is like the limitations of therapy, which I think is, of course, I'm a therapist. I think it's wonderful, but it's just dealing with the personality. That's why I love when people are going to therapy will go to yoga or they'll do other types of healing, because you need to really incorporate the soul, because the soul knows why the personality brought in these certain ailments or difficulties or life circumstances or family issues, because these are all hurdles to overcome and grow. On the earth plane, we need a duality to grow. So everything was perfect. We wouldn't grow. We need the difference, the yin and the yang. We need the male and the female, the black and the white, the gay and the straight. We need that contrast makes us to look beyond ourselves and to kind of overcome different obstacles, to eventually be aware and connected. So theta healing, you test a belief. So after training that, it makes you more intuitive. I can hear beliefs like somebody might say, "I'm not strong enough," or "I can never make it," or a soul belief like "our family has always been poor." And then I test them, and if their muscle's strong, I know they believe it. If they believe it, what happens is that the energy radiates in their aura field. And what we radiate, because we're like energy beacons of light, we actually attract in. So we can attract these experiences unknowingly. They're ancestral stuff or past life stuff that we have no idea what they are. Things can start happening to us over and over again. So theta healing actually can shift the belief. So I test if the muscle's strong. If somebody's belief is "I don't feel good about myself," I test it, and then I go up and I shift it with a code word that you've given. And then all of a sudden I test it again, it's gone. And I've seen people's lives transform and they get stronger and better. And on LinkedIn, I have 100 testimonials of people. It actually, I incorporate in therapy. I actually do it at a major HMO I work in. I do an intuitive, I'm sorry, not an intuitive group. I do an intensive outpatient group, and they have me come in there. Luckily, one of the teachers is a meditation teacher, the other one is a yoga. So we get all the clients who are depressed, suicidal, and we say, I feel valuable. I'm good enough. And then we globally, they muscle test each other and shift it, and the energy gets higher and higher and higher. And then it helps people to make different choices and to feel like they're being upgraded. I don't know if you've experienced that, but it's like an upgrade. You feel like more of yourself. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember after the first session I had with you when you did that with me, it was so interesting to see like when you tap on the muscle where, I was discovering which things I believed and didn't believe when I watched what my body would do. Because like your body doesn't do what you tell it, like what your mind is telling it to do. It does what is stored and as a belief. So yeah, I found it to be very powerful, and I thought that it worked pretty quickly. Specifically for my session with you, you also had me do the um, Ganesha mantra every day.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, it really took out things that weren't supposed to be there. It made me start charging for my work as an intuitive. When I first came to you, I was doing readings for free, like through women's circles.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I started charging. So it really kicked my butt.
Awesome. Ganesha
Theta,
will do that. Awesome.
Theta Healing really, really kicked me. Yeah, so I found it to be very impactful and very quickly too.
Yes, that's the thing. And that, now we're in a different generation. Everyone wants to move quickly and get things done. We're getting into the Aquarian age. Nobody has, like, not that we don't have patience, but it's just things are moving up so fast. Things are escalating at a high vibratory rate. And we're going into the Aquarian age. It's the time of the creator. So we need all these light workers like yourself, all these high beings. We need you guys to be ready and out there spreading the light. You know?
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, another question that I had for you. Do you believe that it's becoming more accepted and acknowledged within the mental health and like therapy space to talk about spirituality and use of intuition and spiritual practices?
That's a great question. I guess it depends where you are. I've an Aries, I'm an Aries, so I kind of pushed it into mental health, but I would look for the signals. I asked the universe to, because there is well, in two ways. And yes, there's a lot of people out there who have done this before. Like Sandra Ingerman, who's a well-known shaman, is actually a therapist, but she just didn't, use that. Patricia Rhoda Copley's, and she talks a lot about universal knowledge. She was a therapist. So there are people out there that have done it. I don't know how many people. A lot of people push their therapy behind and just go to the other world. Some people incorporate it, like Judith Orloff, but I feel like it's opening up. I think spirituality is so important. The meditation, I started teaching mindfulness at the mental health center I work at, and that opened me up to spirit because when I started talking about mindfulness, and they didn't want me to do that. And they didn't say, go ahead and talk about it comes from India or this. They wanted me to do the scientific. So when the doors were closed and spirit led me, I would say, well, this is where mindfulness comes and these are the chakras. And somebody would be like, oh, I see those colors around people. Because many people with mental health crisis, they're having, in my book, I even write this, like, are they losing their mind or finding the divine? So um, yeah. So a lot of times when people are having breakdowns, they're really breakthroughs. Higher souls have difficult, challenging lives. That's what we see somebody who's had all these heartaches, all these pain, all these difficulties, and like, oh, poo poo, I feel so bad for them. No, we got to turn it around. This is a high being of light that decided it was very ambitious, came to earth and had all these things that they wanted to do. And so they set up all these obstacles, all these things that they had to overcome because because they knew they would turn back to God. So when I talk about crystals in mental health, and these are 40 people in a room that are in the intensive outpatient program, very depressed, usually on medications. and ask them pick a crystal, and they would pick a crystal exactly the one they need. I would do theta healing in the group. I talk about dreams. That's the one topic, and I says, anyone had dreams that come true? Half the room raises their hands because a lot of people who have mental breakdowns are empaths, and empaths are very sensitive souls that I think that was sent here by the divine, by the universe, to help people become more sensitive to one another. Many empaths don't want to start a war. He's like, that doesn't feel good. If that happened to me, I would feel bad. So there's a lot of empaths that end up internalizing the pain on the planet and not knowing that this is their clarion call to wake up to their spirit. So me just kind of going in the room, and I would talk about smudging, because a lot of people who are depressed, they feel burnt out. They say they're dead tired, they're exhausted, they're drained, and they all know those words. This is how I normalize it. And I said, have you ever thought that these words are elements? Burnt out means fire. You need more fire. Drained is water. You need more water in your life. Dead tired is earth, and exhaust is air. So then I would show them a smudge, saging. I said, this can help you get all these elements back in your system. So when they went on their walk, they come back, and I would stand there as like the gatekeeper, and I would smudge all the clients that were open to it, that were depressed. And in with sage is earth, and then when you light it, it's fire, and then when you move it with the feather, that's air, and then when you're putting it out is water. So that restores the soul, that restores the aura, that restores their energy field. And the result is in how the people feel. The next weekend, people come back on Monday and say, oh my God, I feel so healed. I slept. I haven't slept in months, and I finally slept. Or I feel like reinvigorated, or I feel calmer. And that's when you start incorporating spirituality and then into mental health. These are shamanic practices. And these are different people around the world, shamans in every culture around the world. And it helps them to realize that this is part and parcel of who we are as souls and spirits, utilizing our soul and spirits to help us to overcome life and understand life. And if you notice on the earth right now, well, in America mostly, that we're attacking a lot of the indigenous people. Um, like the Native Americans at Standing Rock, that they hold the knowledge of having spirituality in their culture as an important part of how they live and survive and understand their purpose here. You have the people on the edge of the borders. Those are a lot of them are indigenous people that are being killed. The Indians in El Salvador, Mexico, or Guatemala. They have these wisdoms, even if they're in their cells. Oh yeah, Grandma used to do that. The African Americans, they come from indigenous. Like they're being attacked. But that's another story. That's like they're the first voice on the planet. So when I saw George go down, George Floyd, I really felt, oh, that's the original voice they're trying to silence, and that won't happen either. So I feel like we're all going back to the basics because we've gotten so much into technology, so much into iPads and phones and tablets, and this we're forgetting about our soul and our spirit in the earth. So the earth keepers are being attacked, so we can look at them and say, wait a minute, what did they do to survive without these things and learn and grow?
Yeah, the age of the Aquarius.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your daily practices that you suggest for people to use as part of their spiritual practice?
Yeah, I love meditating. I teach mindfulness, so I try to meditate. The reason why I started teaching is because I wanted to be able to meditate. So, and I work for the meditation center, the Den. We're doing things remote. So, meditation, even if you take 3 deep breaths and just sit in silence 5 minutes, watching your breath, just to kind of be quiet and listen and to hear. That's very helpful. So meditation. I love smudging, saging. I call it. It's really smudging using. There's a lot of different stages or different types of things you can use. People use different kinds of sweet grass and pine needles, and there's a lot of different things that people use. But clearing my energy field regularly, that helps me whenever I travel in a hotel because I'm sensitive to ghost energy. I always smudge the room because then if not, I'll see the people who've been there before, the ghosts that want to talk and chat. Um, I,
Yeah.
you've had that?
I've had that happen in the hotel room. Yeah, I dreamt that night about a man in the hotel room. I was like, this is uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, once you open up spiritually, you can start seeing everywhere. So I'll sage. I do that really regularly.
It's a
And
good idea.
then, yeah, smudging. Just watch the fire alarms. You got it. And there's spray smudging, which helps too. But I love the fire energy. I work a lot with crystals. I get drawn to crystals. I'll uh, like certain things. I'll see a crystal and I'll grab it, and then it's exactly what I'm working on. If it's labradorite for intuition, or sodalite for helping with different energy things, or different crystals will help me. Um, and then I actually walk. Before I did this podcast, I took a walk, and I let nature. I love being in nature. I'm out in the trees here in Connecticut, and I'll let nature speak to me. So if I see a blue jay, I'm like, oh, that's a message. I see chipmunks. That's about looking for miracles. Today I saw 222 on my walk, just written on a electrical box, and I was like, oh, that's the Holy Spirit with me. So I'll just be. That's the way I commune with the universe. That's the way I commune with nature. That's the way I respect Mother Earth. So I do that every day for health reasons, and then also just to kind of be quiet and walk. Sometimes I listen to podcasts. Sometimes I'm just listening to spirit and observing the world. Because when you work with the universe, you have to observe the world. When you work with spirit, you have to start paying attention. And interesting, a lot of the tenets of mindfulness are very similar to working with the universe, and that's paying attention, becoming aware, being present, non-judgment, um, taking a breath, and all those things that you could do. You can be mindful on your walks, and those are great spiritual practice to incorporate into your life.
One of the next, I'm like looking at our questions and looking at time. Like there's so many things I want to ask. But one that I think is really important is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience that you have been channeling or contemplating on that you find to be very relevant and significant to our times? I know you've kind of incorporated it a little bit throughout our talk, but yeah, anything specifically that you would want to share that you think people should know?
Yeah, definitely. This is the revisiting, because I work with an ascended master who just came to me in a dream. Funny, I went to an indigenous healing ceremony on soul retrieval for the Mexican American woman, and I saw an ascended master in the room and just spoke to me, and I'm like, why is this man here? And then nobody else saw it. And I asked her, and she's like, oh, that's the high priest of the white ray of ascension. I'm like, ascension? I'm not into ascension. But then I realized I was, because I was helping people evolve and find their purpose. But um, and she goes, oh, he was a high, and I looked him up, and his name is Serapis Bey, and he was a high priest in Atlantis. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Like, I love Atlantis, but why now? And when I started doing research on Atlantis, I realized Atlantis was when electronics and technology overtook the love of spirit and the universe and source. So we got so involved with materialism and greed at the time, and electronic stuff, which is happening now, that we forgot about spirit. So I was like, oh, we're revisiting that. It's like Atlantis revisit. So now then I understood why, because I'm helping people find their purpose and kind of evolve. And then how does that incorporate what's going on with all the protests? Um, in 1960s, the African Americans with the civil rights movement, that was very powerful. And I think it's called the Pluto-Uranus opposition happened then. And it's a 60-year cycle. I'm not sure of the planetary name, but I know it's Uranus and Pluto have something to do with it. Could we just had them come up again? So it takes a 60-year cycle, and that's like 2020 now. So when people were all having these conspiracy theories about, the African Americans and being set up, and I'm like, this is the second voice. Africa was the beginning of civilization. So they're the original voice on the planet. So when we're recalibrating, going into a new system from the Piscean age to Aquarian age, of course that voice is going to be the loudest. So and then when I saw George Floyd's taken out, he's the original seed on the planet, and I feel like that's part of the reason. because black men hold the seed, and that's why I feel like you see so many mixtures and people mixing, because the planet is like recalibrating, it's going back to kind of the original thing, but incorporating everyone. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So to people who are biracial, you know, so I feel like that's part of what's going on. So that's the original seed, and then it's interesting. He was on the earth, and he cries to the mother. So his crying to Mother Earth was very symbolic. And as he cried to Mother Earth, I felt like all women were called. Ironically, this is the time of the divine feminine coming in. The divine feminine is the energy of women being respected, and then the Me Too movement happened right before. So we are on a female Earth. This is like a storybook Earth, and we're at the university. We're here to grow and learn. And part of the end of the story is how can we be on Mother Earth? We all recognize it's female and not respect women. How can we be on a planet where there's African Americans and we are the first people? Everyone came from Africa, it's genetically proven. Lucy, the oldest anthropological person, was found in Ethiopia. Um, so she's the oldest person they found, and not respect black people. People are melanated. So it's like, to me, it's like the story is like coming back full circle. So we can respect all souls on the planet and in other galaxies. But what's also interesting about 2012, which is when everyone predicted everything would come down, um, I found out, I don't know how I found out, but in Ethiopia, it's 2012 this year. They have a 13 moon cycle calendar. So it's not 2020 there. In their cycle, it's 2012. So isn't that so cool? And it was interesting. I was out in a restaurant and there's an Ethiopian woman, and I just kind of said, "Hey, what year is in Ethiopia? Are you connected to your culture?" She goes, "Absolutely." She goes, "It's 2012." And I was like, "There it is at the universe." And there's an Ethiopian woman validating it. And she's like, "Yeah." So that was when everything was breaking down, when all the Mayans said at the 2012 that everything was going to break down. Everything is breaking down this year. So, yeah, isn't that interesting? And then also with the whole corona means crown. And the crown is like the crown is a Latin word that means crown. And the crown chakra has been activated worldwide. And then with all the negative thing on the press, we're seeing all this fear, and that's the third eye closing down. But it's being reopened through the crown opening. And then we're wearing masks, and masks are the throat chakra. The top chakras are opening up because we need the top chakras in the Aquarian age because we're going to be creators. So so as the people wear masks, and people are like, "Oh, I don't feel comfortable with that." As we take them off, or we become aware that whenever chakras push back, it pushes out. So then there's that chakra's opening, and then we're connecting to our heart. When we saw George Floyd get killed, people worldwide felt this pain, and that was the pain of the heart of humanity being killed because he represents the beginning of humanity. That's just my interpretation. So I feel like the heart opening, and earth and heart are the same letters turned around. So when you turned around, you look at the word earth, you look at the word heart, same letters. So we have to turn things around to create what we're here to create, which is evolving the soul, evolving the planet, ascending out of this planetary madness. Makes sense.
Wow, what a message
Beautiful.
to leave everybody
with.
So I'd love for you to share what services you offer to clients and where our audience can find you for that work.
Absolutely. So I do Theta Healing readings and healings. I'm doing a lot of things remote. You can do Theta Healing remote, which is really upgrading your soul and cell system. On Instagram, intuitive dash soul, SOUL, solutions. You can Google my name, Intuitive Solutions. My website is www.intuitivesoulhealing.com. And then I'm uploading a lot of great things on Inside Timer. I do a lot of meditations there. I'm just going to upload meditation to the trees, sun meditation, moon meditation. And I have a Facebook group called How to Work with the Universe, and I post a lot of things there also.
And of course, we'll have all of this
on our resource
page as well. But I also wanted to ask, is it possible for anyone that has like the insurance that you work through to be able to see you through their insurance, like as a therapist? What are people's options, or do they just come to you for like outside services on their own?
Yeah, insurance is tricky because in certain the healing they don't allow that, or sometimes I'll do theta, but I'm doing more cash. But I have a very generous because I've been called not to do as much insurance. If they do have a desperate need and they really are opening up, I can use it. But I'm just getting called to do more. A lot of my classes are like how to work the universe is cheap. My classes right now online, I'm doing a lot of things. They're like $30 for an hour and a half. So there's a lot of different options there. So.
There's group classes, and then they can do individual sessions and come to you for therapy, theta healing, or for a reading.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Cool. Amazing. Well, thank you so much
Thank you.
for coming on and
Oh
sharing.
yeah.
Yeah, it was very, very informative.
Yeah. Oh, good. I hope it was helpful, and I thank you so much. It's so glad to see you. I love your name, Woke Mystic. You guys are doing awesome. I've looked at a lot of your stuff, and you guys are amazing. The new generation's here. Yay!
Yeah, yeah, all come together. All of the generations come together because there's still,
Yeah.
yeah, so much knowledge. But yeah, okay, y'all. Until next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.